All right, we're adding a little more to the UConn preview shows here. I'm bringing my friend Stephen on here. You might have heard him on Gamble Grind talking some UConn hoops, and he's going to come on and we're going to preview some of these games before we get to the interview with the opposing beat writer, which will be Zach Braziller. So you'll hear from him in a little bit to preview the St. John's game. He's of the New York Post. But Stephen, we're coming off a really interesting game against Seton Hall. We hadn't seen the team for 2.5 weeks. I know you were in the building down there. Give us your thoughts on being there for the game. Maybe give me something you liked that you saw from the team and something you didn't like.
Well, to start, it was great being back at a game. I mean, it felt like an eternity since we last played.
It was crazy. Even though it was only like 18 days or whatever, I think it was something around there. It still felt like it had been so much longer since you saw UConn play.
It felt like a whole year. I mean, It was ridiculous. But no, it was great being there. A lot of UConn fans. There was good support from the Husky Nation. But I guess the best thing to take away from this game is that they were resilient. I mean, they played the number 24 team in the country, and they, I was really expecting them to struggle in this game. And overall, I mean, they probably should have won this game. And yeah. I mean, going into it, I don't know. I didn't feel very confident, especially if you're a bettor. You saw the line was going in favor of Seton Hall the whole way. I mean,
no one was confident there.
Yeah, no one was taking UConn, and I don't know. I mean, Sanogo looked pretty solid. I mean, he had a double-double. He was a beast on the boards, and he put up 18 points. I mean, you got solid play from the guards, but I mean, the negative is once again, UConn has struggles to close out a game. I mean, you think about it, we were talking about it before we started recording. If they had closed out a couple of these games, I mean, the season would be a completely different look right now. It's unbelievable.
It's kind of crazy. And I know Dan Hurley said it a million times of like, hey, if we were at full strength, we'd be undefeated. You could be undefeated. And, even not at full strength, if it was just a possession or two here or there in some of these games, you do have a different feel about this team.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that final possession with Martin trying to get it down low to Sanogo. I mean, we were like fifth row behind the bench, and it was kind of tough to watch because once it wasn't there, it's like the team doesn't know what to do. And RJ Cole had fouled out. I mean, if you don't have Cole out there and they can't get it to Sanogo, I mean, they don't know what to do. And it's concerning. I mean, like I said, they have a lot of talent, and I still believe in this team, but right now it's a big concern. Like, what are they going to do in the last 2 minutes of a game? Who's going to take the shot?
That's the thing. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit helter-skelter there at the end, and you just didn't know what was going to happen. And the thing that just bugs me is they couldn't even get a shot off. That's the part that just really bugs me. Even to today, if you're going to lose, at least get a shot off, and you could say, hey, you took a corner three or something and it didn't work. But to not get a shot off, I think there was a game, maybe it was, what was it? When was Christian Vital that senior? Was it 2 years ago at Cincinnati where he was dribbling it up the court with like 7 seconds left and dribbled it off his foot or something?
Yeah.
And they lost the game there. It was like, at least just get a shot off. And that's the thing that's still stinging me right now.
So, yeah, just so many empty possessions. And like, over the years too, they've had a lot of shot clock violations. Like you say, they dribble off the foot or someone steps out of bounds. It's never like, I mean, if you missed a shot, you missed a shot, but we're not even getting the look. I mean, it's frustrating.
Yeah, no, it's been tough, but I do think looking and kind of being a realist about the game, there's a lot more to be excited about coming out of that Seton Hall game than there is to be negative. I know, we talked about how they've struggled to close out games of late, but I thought for the first time in a while, the offense actually looked like it was flowing pretty well. Guys were hitting threes. I know 7 guys hit 3-pointers in that game, which is something you haven't seen out of this UConn team a lot, which means, hey, hopefully against St. John's now you get, even if they're cooled down a little bit, you hope it's not like that game against Auburn in the Bahamas where they hit every 3 and then the next 2 games couldn't hit anything. So you hope they're at least able to be a little bit more consistent from 3, but that was a promising sign for me to see guys like that. Like if you can get a Cook and Andre Jackson able to hit a 3 or 2 a game, that's a big boost for an offense that's struggled. And especially coming off the pause, the offensive side of the ball was where I was expecting to see a little bit more of a struggle. And it was actually the opposite, where the defense wasn't as crisp as it usually is with a Dan Hurley team. And that's another thing too, where if they played better defense for a possession or two, and they probably win that game again too against Seton Hall.
Yeah, no, definitely. And when we were watching it, you could tell that the guys were definitely winded and they looked like they
Oh,
hadn't played
yeah.
in a very long time.
Yeah.
So
And
that was
that's
where the
why,
struggle was on defense.
yeah, for me, I thought like, hey, legs will be going, shots will be falling short, but they were hitting the shots. It was just on the defensive end. And I get it coming off that pause. Seton Hall is such a tough and physical team, too. They're going to grind you down even on, normal's rest. But when you've got that extended break and haven't played in a couple of weeks, that's a really tough matchup to come back from out of that pause.
No, I definitely agree there. And you talked about Jackson. That's what I wanted to get to next. Jackson really looked good today. And I've been kind of a guy that's, I've been criticizing Jackson, but I think he actually had a very solid game, minus that air ball 3 at the end, which we won't talk about, but 2 for 3 from 3. He's getting rebounds. He plays really great defense. I don't know. I'm starting to see, the hype behind Andre Jackson. And that's very exciting for me.
The first chunk of this season, I just kept waiting for him to break out a little bit more. He was stuffing the stat sheet in his other ways where he was getting rebounds, he was getting some assists, but was just really doing almost nothing offensively. Like, I think there were a couple of games where he wasn't scoring or just had a basket or two. So I was waiting for him to really be able to put it together. And I think it's helped, they put him in a little bit more of a point guard role at times where he's bringing the ball up to court. And I think it just helps him just be a little bit more comfortable. He's slowing the game down a little bit, which I like to see, because there are some times where he goes 100 miles an hour. He'll grab a rebound and just jump up the court. And the next thing you know, he's throwing a pass to someone who's not ready for it. But the talent is there for him. So I've just been waiting for him to break out. And we're starting to see it a little bit. And if that shot can fall, that's a huge, huge, huge thing for this UConn team.
And yeah, and you said about his ball handling. I mean, they need that. Sadly, they're not getting any kind of play from Gaffney at point guard. So they kind of need someone when Cole's not running the show. I mean, they kind of need someone at least to bring up the ball and maybe change things up on the offensive side. But no, Jackson, I'm liking what I'm seeing. So that makes me happy, because again, I was starting to get concerned. I was like, there's a lot of hype with this kid, and we see all these dunks and in highlight videos and stuff like that. I want to see more. I want to see more out of Andre Jackson, and we're starting to get that.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it was like 2 or 3 games ago where he just had that moment where it clicked for him a bit, and he seemed to be confident. Earlier in the season, he'd get a wide open 3, and he'd look to do anything but shoot the ball. He was trying to see who was open, what else he could do with the ball. But now he's stepping into these shots, and even if the stroke isn't the prettiest shooting stroke, if they're going down, it does the trick. You can't
argue that, right? You can't argue when it goes in.
Yeah, exactly. So as we look now into this game against St. John's, what are you looking to see out of this team against the Johnnies? I know it was a tough matchup for them last year, especially the style that St. John's plays with, where they're going to press them. This is probably going to be the most they've been pressed since the Bahamas, when we saw what Auburn was able to do and VCU was able to do. They had a little bit of a better time against West Virginia when they would put on some sort of press. But I'm interested to see how they respond to that, because I do think it'll be interesting. Again, we saw against Marquette, when Marquette tried to speed them up and press a little bit, it worked out in UConn's favor. So I'm hoping for the same against St. John's here.
Yeah, no, I mean, St. John's is going to be a tough game. I see a lot of UConn fans are kind of writing it in or penciling it as a win, but this is going to be a pesky win. You talk about the press; they're gonna be up in UConn's face. I mean, UConn's really got to protect the ball very well, and they're gonna offensively. I'm not expecting them to shoot the 3 as well as they did against Seton Hall, but
yeah,
at least they're gonna have to keep it up offensively, I think, in any of these games, because again, they haven't played much. They're very winded on the defensive end. They need to get back into the grind and get back into the swing of things. So, I mean, offensively, I think they're gonna need the click, because I don't know. I don't know if their defense is right there, is there right now. I think they're going to need the overall game. Like, sometimes you could grit it out with a Dan Hurley team with the defense, but I think offensively you're going to need to have a good game against St. John's.
I know you've got games later on in the year against Villanova, and you'll get games against Creighton and another game against Seton Hall. But I think this might be one of the bigger weeks of the season for this UConn team, and going and getting St. John's at home and then going on the road to Providence. I know we don't want to look ahead too much to that Providence game yet, but these are 2 winnable games. And if UConn wants to kind of reach its ceiling that's expected from them and where they want to go, kind of feels like you got to get at least one of these, if not both these games.
I tell you what, they can't afford to lose. If they ever lost, on Wednesday night. I mean, there's so much pressure on that Providence game. They can't come
Yeah,
away 0-2 on the week. And then you got Butler next week. I mean, Butler's not the greatest team in the world, but it's going to be hard to beat a team back to back. We were talking about it before. I've never seen UConn play a team this quick back to back ever. I don't think in my lifetime, but that's going to be tough. I don't know. The Big East, there's going to be so many winnable quad one wins and to help you get over. But you can't let some of these get away, especially the ones at home. You can't, like, losing to Providence hurt, back in December, because you expect to win at home. So, and then now you're putting pressure on yourself to win at Providence. And I don't know, you just can't afford to lose 2 games in this stretch here.
Yeah, when you look at the schedule, as you look out a little past this week, as you mentioned, you got Butler twice, you got Georgetown, and then you got DePaul. So those are 4 games that are pretty winnable, that if you could pick up some momentum this week, UConn could be in a really good spot heading into February, really getting some momentum behind it. So I think this week is key to kicking that all off. And while they still could get on that roll after this week, when the games lighten up a bit, you want that momentum starting this week, I think, to show that this team can mess around and really cause some trouble.
Oh yeah, you want to make a statement. You want to show that UConn's here. I mean,
yeah.
Everyone in preseason, what were we picked second in the Big East, I think. I mean, you want to show that that's where we belong. I mean, we get a lot of talk preseason, and we got the preseason rank, but you got to show it now. I mean, I know they've had some obstacles. I know COVID's come in play and all these other things and injuries. But at some point, you have to, get over the hump, and you got to start winning, and you got to close out these games, and you got to make a statement. You got to say UConn's here, and they're ready to take on anybody in the Big East.
Yeah, and that's why I think this game Wednesday is so important for them. You've got a chance against the St. John's team that struggled a little bit of late, and you could make a statement game right here. If you go out at home and can beat up on St. John's. I mean, in that game last year against St. John's, what were they, up 14 or so on them before they choked it away? So you've shown what you could do against a pretty similar St. John's team in terms of bringing back the big names that they had last year. So you've shown what you could do against them. And I really was bummed that we never got an opportunity to play them again last year, because I really thought UConn could take them and show, kind of like what they did with Providence last year, where they blew that one and then, beat Providence pretty easily. So I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup. And again, a big opportunity for this team. I know St. John's is struggling a little bit in terms of KenPom. I think they're 89 or 90 right now. But hey, it's a really good opportunity to make that statement and show that you could bounce back too from that tough loss at Seton Hall.
Oh, definitely. I agree 100%.
So give me a player. I know you mentioned Andre Jackson earlier, but give me a player you're looking to see, kind of break out and have a big impact in this game against
Jalen Gaffney. Jalen Gaffney, where is my? I've been a huge supporter of Jalen Gaffney since day one. Where is Jalen? He feels like he's regressing on me a little bit. I mean, maybe this is a game where he can come out and show what he's shown us in the past. I mean, he's a solid point guard. I don't know what's going on. He seems a little timid on the court. He slows things down a lot, and I don't know. I expect a little bit more out of Jalen Gaffney, and maybe this is the time for him to show up.
Yeah, they're going to need the ball handlers against St. John's. And I think one thing that surprised me a little bit about this stretch where Jalen Gaffney hasn't done much, usually when he came in, he always had a steadying presence to him, but he picked his shots and he would take some shots from here and there. I feel like he hasn't really done much in terms of even trying to search for his shot. And I'm not sure that's by design, but I'm just trying to pull up some stats here and even see. I mean, he was 1 of 2 against Seton Hall, took no shots, one shot against Marquette. He was 0 for 3 against Providence. So he wasn't even really looking for a shot much. And you could tell that's kind of a sign of a guy who's been struggling and might not have that confidence right now. But for me, he's one of those guys, maybe he sees the ball go through the basket a couple times and it could jumpstart him a bit. And if you could get what you were expecting out of Jalen Gaffney, I mean, he was the only guy who really showed up in that Maryland game and gave you some hope for this year. Like, hey, what he was able to do against that game, if you could get that all next year out of him with what you're bringing back, this is going to be a really good UConn team. And while they're still pretty good, I feel like he's one of those pieces that could help just give UConn that extra, punch they're going to need off the bench.
And he's going to get the opportunity. I mean, they don't have another point guard. I mean, they have Cole. I guess they have Martin that could dribble, and bring the ball up. And so with Jackson, but I mean, true point guards, I mean, it's just Cole and Gaffney, especially if he's not going to play Diggins, which is, it's very clear he's not going to play Diggins.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at these stats. I didn't even realize the Marquette game, he only played 7 minutes. 7 minutes. He did nothing in that game.
Yeah.
And that was a game that UConn did fairly well. I mean, the final score was 78-70, but for the most part, I mean, they were pretty much in control of that game.
Yeah, no, as you say that, just kind of looking, played only 11 minutes against Seton Hall, 14 against Providence. And I guess to some extent, if you're struggling at the level he is, you might not get those minute opportunities. But I'd like to see him get a chance to break out. I think that was a good name you mentioned there.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, I'll give you that. It's might not be one that everyone's thinking of, but I really like what I've seen from a Cook of late, and I'd like to see him do a little bit more. I mean, he's been blocking some shots, hitting threes. I feel like every time he puts up a three, I feel like it's going to go in. Like the shots look good. He looks good out there. He's the guy I'm looking to see a little bit more out of. And if they could get that consistently from him, it's such a big piece, because I think he was one of the big mysteries heading into this year. You really didn't see him much last year. And it was like, what are you going to get out of a Cook this year? And he's shown you some flashes of what he can do out there. But I think what we saw in that last game against Seton Hall, I know he didn't play a ton in the second half, which surprised me a little bit, because he did have such a good first half where he was hitting some shots, blocking some shots. So I'm going to go with him and see what we could get out of him.
I'm with you. I don't understand why he's not playing a lot in second halves of games. I mean, I feel like this has happened a couple of times. I think in the Providence game too, he played the first half and then we didn't see him again. I know he didn't really register any points, but he's a rim protector. I mean, he's not the greatest rebounder in the world, but on the defensive end, I think he's worthy of showing up and putting him in the lineup in the second half. I don't know. And then you talk about his threes. He's very selective with his threes, but they go in.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
I mean, that's what you want. This is what this team needs. They need 3-point shooting. They need a lot of, offense. And then on the defensive end, he's a shot blocker, rim protector. I don't know. I don't know what Hurley's thought process is behind that. I don't know. Because, I mean, some of these other guys are struggling too, or had their moments, and they seem to have bigger leashes compared to like guys like a Cook and some of the other players on this team.
Yeah. So I think we gave everyone out there listening 2 guys that are going to be interesting to look and see what we could get. 2 guys that might not be the biggest names or having the biggest impact, but if you could get a little bit more out of them, I think really can almost change the trajectory of this team a little bit and what the ceiling can be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the the 2020 season that ended up getting canceled at the end. I mean, Cook was such a huge part of that team until he went down in that Memphis game. I mean, if they had him and we had a postseason, I mean, that could have made the difference in the world in the AAC tournament. I mean, he was having a solid freshman year.
Yeah. So fingers crossed we could get some good play out of Jalen Gaffney and Cook. And I think the better they play, I think that only means better things for this team too. So yeah. We'll wrap with this. You give us your prediction for the St. John's game.
I mean, I guess I'll predict a UConn blowout. I think we get a double-digit blowout at Gamble. We're back home. Hurley was talking today in the presser how much he loves playing at Gamble, and the players love playing at Gamble, and they're back home. So maybe this is their breakout game where they make a statement in the Big East, they blow someone out, and we get back on the right track and have some momentum going into that Providence game.
I like where you're going. I'll be a little more pessimistic, but not by much. I'm going to say it's like an 8-point game where you feel pretty comfortable for most of the game. Like maybe UConn's got it to like 12 or 14 and St. John's cuts it to 10 or 9. And it just goes back and forth a little bit in that range. So
similar to the Marquette game, right?
Yeah. So I'll say like 75, 67, something like that, where you feel pretty good for the most part. You're not super concerned about them making a run. but time to time they might throw you a little bit of a punch there.
Yeah, and I think they put up a lot of points. So I mean, if you're betting the over, I like the over, whatever it is, whatever comes out, hit the over.
There we go, everyone. There's the play of the podcast today, the over in this game, which you don't necessarily see a ton of UConn games. So if you want to take the over on a UConn game, I think this might be the one to do it. Well, Stephen, thanks so much for joining me today. This is fun getting to talk and do a little bit of a preview here, and we'll be back throughout the season to get these going and just give a little talk. And we'll open up the Twitter line and share your thoughts. We'll get some other ideas on here too, so we could have some more things to talk about here throughout the season. It's been a little tricky now coming out of the pause. We're basing this all off of one game pretty much, and then what happened a month and a half ago. So we've got a lot of games coming up, so it's gonna definitely be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, be on the lookout. We'll be talking a lot of Husky hoops in the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully good stuff. So Stephen, thanks for coming on. And we'll transition now. We'll go to Zach Braziller from the New York Post to give us the preview on St. John's. For me today, we've got Zach Braziller of the New York Post here to talk and preview UConn St. John's. You heard him last year when we were previewing this, and he's back this year. So Zach, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I know this is a matchup that Big East fans have looked forward to, and I know UConn fans are excited to be back in the building for this UConn St. John's game since they weren't able to last year. Take us behind the scenes a little bit so far at this St. John season. I know 9-4, and I guess we could start with this as kind of an easy question, if it is easy. But if you had to throw a grade on this St. John's team so far this year, what you giving them in terms of how they've maybe have not lived up to expectations?
I'd give them a D, and I think that's probably maybe a little generous. I mean, look, they have not played well. There's no doubt. They're 1-4 against high major teams. The only win was a narrow win at home against DePaul. They had a very light non-conference schedule. They had a bunch of close calls in there. They almost lost to NJIT. They almost lost to St. Francis Brooklyn. There was a lot of excitement and hype for this team, and just this so far, it just hasn't been there. It's early. They've only played 2 league games, so there is time. But right now, this season just, has not gone the way a lot of people expected.
What do you think have been some of the biggest factors for why this team might have disappointed, so far through these first 13 games here?
The transfers have been very inconsistent. They brought in a bunch of transfers. They had a good amount of players leave, and they've been very inconsistent. Montez Mathis from Rutgers has probably been the most consistent one. Even he's had some shaky games when the game lost at Pittsburgh at the Garden. He didn't play well. The loss to Providence Saturday, he didn't play well. You have Steph Smith at Vermont, who's had a few really good games, but just has been consistent. Aaron Wheeler of Purdue probably had his best game of the year against Providence on Saturday at 15 points, but that's kind of been an anomaly. He hasn't been consistent. Joel Soriano from Fordham has struggled. Tariq Coburn from Hofstra, started out really good the first few games and has kind of fallen off the map. So it's just been inconsistency. Mike Anderson likes to play a ton of guys, and that certainly I don't think is necessarily helped, because it's just they really haven't set roles. They don't have defined roles yet. And, we're in early January here, but I think it's that, everyone knew that their 2 stars would be Julian Champagny and Posh Alexander. And, they've been pretty good for the most part. Posh has struggled a little with turnovers, and the 3-point shot hasn't been great, but he's been pretty good. Julian's been very good. Their worst loss by far was Pittsburgh when he didn't play, and there's no doubt they would have won that game if he was in there. He's been very good. He's averaging over 20 a game. But it's really, it's the transfers. They don't typically. Mike Anderson's teams do 2 things very well. They have a high plus minus turnover margin, and they hurt you in transition. This team has struggled in both those areas. They're forcing turnovers, but they're turning the ball over way too much, and they've struggled finishing. They have not been as good of a transition team as they were in his first 2 years, and that's really been the big issue to me so far.
I'm curious to dive into one of those components that you brought up there, and that's the pressure. And we've associated that with Mike Anderson and the style of play that he wants to play. We saw it against UConn last year. UConn struggled with the press a little bit in down in the Bahamas when they played, especially Auburn, and VCU gave them some fits as well. I know they've had some time to grow from those games, but how do you see the St. John's press playing out against this UConn team tomorrow night?
I mean, that's really their own, that's got to be, they've got to get the game back up and down. They've got to turn defense into offense to win this game, or even have a chance to win this game, because UConn is just too good defensively in the half court. UConn is just too good inside for St. John's, where if we're talking a half court game, I think it's really plays into UConn's hands. That's the other thing, the press hasn't really consistently been good. Now they don't always just press, they'll pick up full court, they'll pressure you to hope to wear you down. It's not just necessarily we're just going to press you as you get off the bus. That's not not really how he does it. But they've got to press a lot tomorrow. They've got to create turnovers. They've got to get it up and down to hopefully beat some of UConn's bigs down court. Because if we're talking about a half court game, they're going to struggle on the glass and they're going to struggle to defend inside.
In terms of if UConn's going to come out on top tomorrow, and looking for how UConn might be able to exploit some of St. John's weaknesses, it seems like the front court matchup tends to skew pretty heavily in UConn's favor. Is that something you see as a big factor come tomorrow's game, or do you see there being some other areas that UConn might be able to exploit?
There's no doubt about it. Against Providence, St. John's played a very good first half. They're up 3 at the half. Probably should have been up more, but they had some chances in transition they didn't convert. But what killed them is Joel Soriano, who's he's 6'11", he's a big body. The kid from Fordham got in foul trouble, and without him, Nate Watson basically got whatever he wanted. I do think Soriano can at least help in the paint against UConn bigs. And then there's a freshman, Omar Stanley, who I was surprised didn't play more against Providence. He started the second half after Soriano went to the bench in foul trouble, and he did a decent job on Watson for a few minutes, but then he went to the bench and we didn't really hear from him again. I think he's a guy that's got a lot of potential. He's 6'9". He's got some meat on him. He's about 240. He can, hit a little baby jumper. I think he's going to be a good player for them down the road. And he's a guy I think I'd like, I think you're going to see more and more of it. Maybe you see more of him tomorrow night.
So UConn Seton Hall was on at the same time as St. John's Providence. I didn't get a chance to dive into the game too much, but for UConn fans who are probably in a similar position to me, can you take us through what flipped in that game for St. John's? What were they doing so well in the first half that they, kind of fell apart a bit in the second half? Because I know Providence went on a pretty big extended run there in that game.
Well, they got Watson in foul trouble. Watson had 2 fouls, so we only really played 9 minutes. So that was one thing they did well, and they played good defense. This team hasn't been a great defensive team, but I thought that first half they played well defensively, despite fouling a little too much. They were connected. They forced Providence into tough shots. And then the second half, once Watson started kind of having his way, it forced more doubles, and that led to some openings for Providence. And Posh had a terrific first half. He had 13 points. He was creating havoc at both ends. And that second half, Providence went into his zone and it kind of cut off his driving lanes. And he really didn't have the same second half. The way St. John's is built, they need their 2 stars to play well if they want to beat a good team on the road. At home is maybe a little different, but on the road where it's really tough to play in this league, if Champagnie and Alexander aren't both going and aren't both playing well, it's going to be really tough for them. And that's really what happened. After Julian had a great game against DePaul, he had 34 points and 16 rebounds. He couldn't find it against Providence. He was 0 for 8 from 3, and then Posh only scored 2 points in the second half. If those 2 guys, just the way this team is built, this team isn't going to be able to score enough to beat good teams if those guys aren't really producing.
We saw, a top player at, in Seton Hall and Kadari Richmond bully UConn and really kind of take over that game for Seton Hall. If UConn and Dan Hurley, if tonight they're putting the final touches on their plans to stop a guy like Julian Champagnie, how are they drawing it up to stop him? How do you take him off his game a little bit? And how have teams done that throughout the year?
It's interesting because I thought he would be okay against Providence. I know Justin Minai is a good defender, but he's a few inches shorter, and I thought Julian could just shoot over him. But Minai did a good job. Now, there were a lot of shots that Champagnie just missed, that shots that he usually makes. So I think you got to kind of factor that in. But to me, I'm going with a quick guy that can really stay with him. You know, he can go past bigger guys. He's 6'8", but he's got that athleticism. I mean, I would assume you'll see a lot of you see some of Tyler Polley on him, and I'm sure they'll throw a bunch of different guys on him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I remember last year after that game, listening to Danny Hurley talk about Posh. He's going to go. I guarantee he's emphasizing that Posh killed them last year.
Yeah,
I guarantee he's going to try to get RJ Cole to take that as a personal test to shut down Posh, because when Posh is going, it just makes St. John so much better because he makes everyone around him better. When he's playing well, when he can hit a few threes, it just completely changes the game for them. So as good as Julian is, and he's obviously having a terrific year, and I think he's clearly has the highest ceiling of anyone on this team. Posh is kind of probably their most, he's not their best player, but he's probably their most valuable player.
I'm curious, what we were tweeting earlier when I saw you put out the line of UConn being favored by 11.5, and I threw out that it surprised me a little bit. I thought it was a little bit high. I thought maybe in like the 8 range is what I was expecting, but I saw some St. John's fans in the mentions there, and they were pretty down on this team too. What's the general feeling around this St. John's team right now? I know you gave them a D when we opened, but is the fan base in a similar position where they're pretty down on this team right now?
I mean, I think the fan base is a lot more down on them than I am. I mean, I still think this team by February is going to be good. I think they're going to get better. Like, look, the non-conference was really soft, which to me did not do this team any favors.
Mm-hmm.
He's still trying to see what he has. It's really a completely new team. They brought back 3 guys who played last year. They had a lot of defections from their supporting cast. So I don't know if they're going to make the tournament. I thought they would at the beginning of the year. I'm not sold now because they've really dug themselves a hole. But I do think they're going to become a good team by February. I do. It's his teams always get better as the year goes on. But right now, there's just not a lot of confidence with what you've seen. They were even their wins in the non-conference were mostly unimpressive, except maybe Monmouth and Colgate were probably their 2 best performances. And the fan base really is very down on this team. Now, look, this is a beaten down fan base. This is a program that hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since 2000. This was a team that people thought had a real shot to make the tournament last mid-February when they were really rolling, and they just didn't finish strong enough. So it's a fan base that, came this year with high expectations and has been very, very disappointed by what they've seen. But the way the St. John's fan base works is every game is either the worst or the best. If they somehow win tomorrow night, the fan base thinks they're going to go to the Sweet 16. If they lose tomorrow night, the fan base thinks they're not going to win another Big East game. So it's kind of the way New York City is to an extent. But right now, I don't think you're going to find a lot of St. John's fans who think they're going to win this game.
Hey, Joe Judge is gone, so maybe that'll help boost the spirits a little bit. And heading into this one, I'll wrap with this one. Just being a reporter who's covering the Big East in St. John's, just curious to get your general thoughts on the league this year. I know it's gotten off to a really good start. I think in the latest bracketology, I think Joe and already had 7 Big East teams in the NCAA tournament. Thoughts, again, just on the league in general, maybe who's the team to beat, and if that's still Villanova to you?
I think the league is really good. I think there are 4 clear teams that could very definitely make the Sweet 16. Xavier, Seton Hall, UConn, and Villanova. I think Providence is good. I know they're ranked. They were ranked 16th in the country. I think Providence has kind of played maybe a little above its head. I don't think they're as good as those other 4, but I think they're right there. I think Marquette is good. I think Creighton and Providence have probably played better than they are, and I think those teams are going to see some regression. I think this is deep as the league has been, maybe since it was newly formed because of those top teams. I think Seton Hall is really good. I think they're going to get better. I think UConn is much better than their record and the fact that they're not ranked. I think they're clearly a top 15 to 20 team in the country. I think Villanova is good. Villanova is probably going to make a Sweet 16 because they're probably going to end up with a 3 or 4 seed, even though I don't even know if Villanova is as good as the other 3 teams. Yeah. Seton Hall easily could have beat them, and that was when they had 8 guys, about, I guess, 10 days ago. I don't think there's a team to beat. I think there are 4 teams that are just as good. Now, Villanova right now, is kind of straightened themselves out, and they have a few good wins. I think all things being equal, I could see Seton Hall being the best team in this league just because of their depth, because of their defensive ability and their length. But I don't think they're going to win the league because those 2 losses they took when they had 8 guys is probably going to be too much to overcome. You know, I could see Xavier winning this league. I think I could see Villanova winning this league. I think Seton Hall and UConn might be the 2 best teams, but they've taken a few losses when they were shorthanded, which might, you know, kind of end up burning them in terms of winning the conference. But in terms of March, I don't, you know, when you look at the way these teams guard and the kind of players they have, I think these are 2 teams that could have really, really big runs.
Well, Zach, I appreciate the time. Looking forward to renewing the UConn St. John's rivalry again tomorrow night. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to get you back on before the next matchup. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Have a good one. All right.
Absolutely. You too.